Hey everyone, this is Michael again, and welcome to the Monday Night Raw review. And this review is going to be on last night's edition of Raw. And I was over at my friend's house last night. You know, we were hanging out all day yesterday, so we watched Raw last night. And for this week and next week, my Raw reviews are going to be on a Tuesday. Are going to be uploaded on Tuesdays. But anyways, this Raw last night was from the US Bank Arena in Cincinnati, Ohio. And my God, this show last night, this show was fucking atrocious. This show was shit last night. Absolute fucking shit. This was as bad as last week. But it could be worse. You know, this show last night could have been worse as last week's. This last night's Raw could even be the worst Raw of the year so far. But yeah, let's get on with this Raw review. So, Raw opened last night with Vince McMahon coming out. Vince welcomes us to Raw, and he says that, you know, this show will be one for the ages, and no one will forget tonight's show. Well, I think we all want to forget because of how shitty and bad this show was last night. I think I could say that for every single Raw of the year so far. We all want to forget the show. So, he gets interrupted by Roman Reigns. Roman Reigns came out, and before Raw got started this week, over the weekends there was rumors saying that WWE was going to be had booked Roman for Raw. Basically, you know, this is a desperate attempt for WWE because they are in panic mode right now. They are in panic mode because their ratings have gone down the shitter. Last week's Raw, I heard, averaged a 2.16, I think it was 2.168 or something like that, but it was in the 2.1 for the last hour. Soon, those ratings are going to be hitting low ones. I would not be surprised if last night's Raw averages a 2.0 or hell, in the low ones. I wouldn't be surprised. So, Roman ended up coming out. Vince tells Roman he's got the police right over there, if Roman wants to lay his hands on him again. So Vince is like, who the hell do you think you are, you know, to be on Raw when he's assigned to SmackDown? Roman ends up telling Vince to watch his tone. He ends up telling Vince, yes, he is on SmackDown, but he's been on Raw for a long time. And he always said he'd leave this place better than he found it. And, you know, when he was out, he saw Vince and his kids tell the whole world the fans were in control now. And he ends up saying, oh, but that was a lie. And of course, it was. Remember when we were promised, oh yeah, we're gonna you know, shake it up here. We're gonna give you fresh new faces, you know, brand new matches. The rematch clause is going to go away. Nothing was done. Nothing. That was all a goddamn fucking lie. Yeah, and he says, Roman says to Vince that his spoiled kids have been running around trying to run the show, and that it's over now. Because Roman doesn't listen to Vince or take his orders. He says he takes them from the WWE universe now. And so Vince asks if Roman thinks he can show up anywhere and the fans will like it. Roman says if they keep making this noise, he'll show up every Monday. And Vince ends up saying that that's not going to happen because it will be like anarchy and he'd have no control. And so Daniel Bryan ended up coming out. Daniel Bryan made his return on Raw. He was out for a month with the injury. So after WrestleMania, he was out. So Daniel Bryan came out. Vince says, "Oh, this is a bad dream," and he asks Daniel Bryan what he's doing. Daniel says he spent the last month in meditation, looking for answers. He says when he heard Roman was showing up on Raw, when the big dog was showing up on Raw, and oh yeah, we can't forget, Michael Cole. I thought this was going to go away, but every time when Roman came out on Raw, we'd always hear Michael Cole go, "And here comes the big dog." Every time he says that, I'm like, oh my god. It's so fucking cringeworthy. I thought that was going to go away. We were going to stop hearing Michael Cole, say, "Oh, and here comes the big dog." It lasted for maybe like 2 weeks. Or 3 weeks top. So Daniel Bryan would say when he heard the big dog was showing up on Raw, he figured out that he could have an intellectual conversation with Vince. So Kofi ended up interrupting Daniel. Kofi Kingston came out. He says he knows the roster shakeup was a big deal, but he has an issue with Daniel Bryan. And if he had a problem with WrestleMania, he didn't have to go to the McMahons. He says he could have filed his complaint directly with your WWE champion. Daniel was like, "Oh, okay, I got it." He says Kofi is an undeserving champion who should have never gotten a title shot, and he goes on to say that Kofi's win was a fluke. He says his 11-year journey was so hard. This is what Kofi was saying. Daniel Bryan was saying this. He says his 11-year journey was so hard because a pancake throwing novelty should have never gotten here in the first place. Kofi pointed out that he is here with the title around his waist, and there ain't a damn thing Daniel Bryan could do about it. And so Vince interrupts and asks, what if we had a wild card rule where 3 members of each roster of Raw and SmackDown could come to the other show? So you know what this means? This wild card thing in place makes the whole Superstar Shakeup, that whole thing, a complete waste of our time. Why have a Superstar Shakeup and then you have a wild card where 3 members of each roster could come to either show, could come to the other show, whether it be Raw or SmackDown. Like I said, this makes the Superstar Shakeup, it made no sense. It made no sense to have a Superstar Shakeup now. So Vince goes on to say that he's a genius. Oh yeah, he's a genius. He's not a fucking genius. He's not a fucking genius nowadays. Look at the product. Look at the quality of the shows. The quality of these shows are insufferable. They are shit after shit every single week. Especially Raw. Yeah, he goes on to say, "Oh, I'm a genius." And Kofi asks if this was his idea the entire time, before saying that he could spin it how he likes. And that he saw Roman's tweet and that, Big E and Xavier are on the mend. He figured, why not show up to Raw also? And he's like, why should Roman have all the fun? And Daniel Bryan says, nothing about Raw is fun. Well, you said that perfectly. You said that right. Nothing on this show is fun anymore, like how it used to be. So Daniel Bryan has a point there. And he goes on to say that he's not here for fun. He's here to get his rematch for the WWE Championship. So out came Drew McIntyre. Drew McIntyre came out. He says if nobody in the back will do anything about this, he guesses it's up to him. He says this is not SmackDown presents Raw. He says Kofi and Daniel Bryan are lucky that he cares more about the egomaniac Roman Reigns than either of them. He says Roman thinks he can do what he wants and that the rules don't apply to him. And McIntyre says, well, he's going to Claymore his ass back down to earth right now. So Roman says that didn't work at WrestleMania, but he can try again tonight. And so Vince ends up interrupting. Vince asks, what if tonight we had 2 WrestleMania rematches? He says one of which will be for the WWE Championship, and he puts himself over as brilliant that he's a genius. This whole segment was absolutely fucking shit. It was just Vince putting himself over, considering himself a genius. I'm sorry, but him being a genius, that all went out the window years ago. I said when the product became stale and shit. So he ends up announcing that the 2 WrestleMania rematches. One of them will be for the WWE Championship, which will be Kofi Kingston versus Daniel Bryan. And Vince ends up leaving, but AJ Styles ended up coming out. And then Raw went to commercial. Then when Raw came back from the commercial, Styles and Vince were in the ring. Styles asked Vince, what he's doing. He says he finally gets to Raw, and the next thing he knows, SmackDown superstars are coming in. Vince, reiterates that, it's his wild card rule thing. And Styles says that's pretty convenient. He goes on to say he spent years on SmackDown making it the house that AJ Styles built. And once he sinks his teeth into Raw and gets a shot at the Universal Championship, and Vince brings, Seth Rollins, Vince brings, Roman Reigns in. And Styles says, is that how this whole wild card thing works? And Styles ends up telling Vince, because if this whole wild card thing works, maybe he should go over to SmackDown tomorrow to get a couple of his friends. What friends? What friends did AJ Styles have on SmackDown? We didn't see it. And he wants to go over to SmackDown to get a couple of his friends to come to Raw. And so Seth Rollins ended up coming out. He says he gives Styles the benefit of the doubt for 1 week, and he sucker punches him. He says that's the last time he'll ever get one over on him. He points out that SmackDown has been around a lot longer than Styles had been part of WWE. So there we go, Seth Rollins taking shots at AJ Styles. He says it was fine before him, and it will be fine now. And that this is Monday Night Rollins. Styles says he knows where he is and what, he did last week. He says he tried to be a good sport. And what did Seth do? He put the title in his face and kept running his mouth. And he says if he's going to treat, Styles like that, he's not a man. And Styles, he says if he's going to treat Styles like that, he's not a man. He needs to know that he's a man that can kick his ass. And he didn't just put him through a table. He gave him the phenomenal forearm. This is what Seth Rollins was, saying. He gave him the phenomenal forearm through a table. And he says that Money in the Bank, nothing's going to change. And so Vince wants to make the match happen tonight. And they get ready to get going. And, Vince, was saying no. And that he actually wanted Seth and AJ Styles to team up against a tag team that he's got in the back. So, McMahon ends up making the match. And who did they face? Well, Bobby Lashley came out. And when Bobby Lashley came out, you knew who his tag team opponent was going to be. Baron Corbin. So there we go. We had Baron Corbin and Bobby Lashley versus Seth Rollins and AJ Styles. And when WWE puts, competitors, competitor for, a title and they team up, that something's going to happen and the competitor's going to walk off to the back. Something's going to happen. They're not going to continue the match. They're going to walk off and let the other guy take the pinfall. Well, exactly that was what happened last night. But this match itself, it was, okay with just because Seth Rollins and AJ Styles. But in the end, Styles went for the phenomenal forearm. He was going to hit the phenomenal forearm to Baron Corbin, but Corbin ended up shoving Seth in the way, and so Seth Rollins ended up taking the phenomenal forearm once again. Styles ended up getting out of the ring, walking off to the back, and then Corbin ended up hitting the end of days to Seth Rollins. So there you go. Corbin and Lashley end up winning the match. So match itself was okay. But I forgot to mention the whole segment with Vince and everybody. It was a fucking half hour. A half hour, 30-minute segment. We didn't get the match. We didn't get this first match, this tag team match, until maybe around 8:35. Somewhere around there, 8:40. So the whole 30 minutes opening to Raw, it was just Vince McMahon, putting himself over, calling himself a genius, and issuing this wild card thing, which makes the Superstar Shakeup absolutely pointless. That's all it was. 30 minutes, half hour of Vince McMahon, praising himself. And making WrestleMania rematches. So after the tag team match, we had Sami Zayn come out. And Sami Zayn comes out, he recaps some of the things that, happened. And he asks the crowd what they've got. He says he watched the whole thing go down to have liked it. He says the difference is when our excitement wears off, we're still us. Which means we're still stuck after the fact that, being that miserable person we see in the mirror. So it was just Sami just putting down the fans. like how it is every week. I mean, this is starting to get boring now with Sami Zayn. He has not had one match yet. He just goes on and cuts a segment, just putting the people down. So Braun Strowman ended up coming out, and they reused. This is not something that is new. We've seen this before. How many times have we seen Braun Strowman, with Sami Zayn? Braun Strowman ended up, tossing around Sami Zayn, having, matches with him. This is nothing new. So Braun Strowman came out. Sami Zayn tosses the microphone, takes his jacket off, takes his cap off. Strowman starts to charge in. They go over the barricade and into the crowd. And we had, them go to the back. We went backstage. We saw, Braun Strowman was still chasing Sami Zayn. And there was, Braun Strowman ended up finding, himself with Sami Zayn. He threw Sami Zayn into a garage door. Strowman, Sami Zayn ends up throwing bins at Strowman. Crawls under the door, but under the garage door. But Strowman ends up grabbing Sami by the ankle, and he gets scooped up. Strowman power slams Sami Zayn into a dumpster. And then we had a garbage truck. We saw a garbage truck. It backed up. The garbage truck ended up picking up the dumpster. And, just all the, dumpster just, lifted up and then turned upside down with, Sami Zayn in it. But we all know that Sami wasn't in the dumpster when, it got picked up. So that's basically what happened. We saw this before. Nothing new with Sami Zayn and Braun Strowman. We've seen them both go at it before. Then we had the Lucha House Party versus 3 unnamed jobbers. What more can I say? What more can I say about this? Lucha House Party end up winning. Moving on. So after that, we saw Naomi and Natalya. They were backstage. They get invitations from Lacey Evans to be ringside during her match. And that formal attire is required. So Naomi ends up wondering who Lacey Evans is to tell them what to wear. And Natalya mentions how arrogant Lacey has become. And then Dana Brooke rolls up to ask if they got invitations also. And Natalya ends up saying that they're ready for her nonsense, for Lacey's nonsense. And they all agreed that Lacey has got to go. So that was what happened backstage. Then we had Ricochet versus Robert Roode against, of course, Robert Roode with the mustache. And this was pretty boring. This was a boring match. Ricochet ended up getting the win, 630 on Robert Roode, score the win. Of course, 2 weeks ago, Robert Roode won a match, and now this week he loses. 2 weeks later, he loses. So much for WWE trying to, do Robert Roode better now that he's a heel. They're just going to possibly ruin him again. So. Then after that, we saw Rey Mysterio and his son Dominic. They were walking backstage. They run into Heath Slater, of course, in front of Rey's locker room. Rey ends up asking Dominic to let him get ready for his match. So Rey goes in. Dominic walks off. and we see Samoa Joe is behind him. He's following Dominic, and Raw went to commercial. Then when Raw came back from commercial, we saw Samoa Joe. He was chatting with Dominic. He says he's glad they finally met in person. And he says that Dominic has been here plenty of times with his dad and with his Uncle Eddie. And he noticed last week that he couldn't wait to run out there and hoist his father up on his shoulders. And he says that makes him think he wanted to embarrass and humiliate him. And he was like, is that because he did the same to his father? So Dominic tries to answer Joe, but Joe ends up yelling at him. Joe ended up coming off really good here. He ended up coming off like a dick. And Joe ended up yelling at him and tells him to take a message to Ray, to his father, and that he's looking forward to his title defense. That was basically, what happened. But I like Joe here. Like I said, he came off, like a dick. Okay, so that's what happened. Sorry about that, but after the Joe and Dominic thing backstage, we had Lacey Evans versus this local. I think her name is Allie Katrina. Before the match got underway, Naomi, Dana Brooke, and Natalya were out there. And Alexa Bliss also came out. And this match with Lacey and Allie only lasted maybe 2 seconds. Lacey Evans won with the woman's right to Allie Katrina. That was basically it. Then we had after the match, Lacey ended up getting on the mic. She ended up thanking everyone for attending her event before saying, you just saw what a real woman is capable of. She says, and it will be just like that at Money in the Bank when Becky Lynch loses her title courtesy of a woman's right. She's like, what now? One of the women here might win the briefcase, and she says, if any of them have the audacity to cash in on her, they'll quickly regret losing whatever opportunity they had to become a champion. And so out came Becky Lynch. She ends up jumping Lacey, ends up beating her down, punches, went out to the floor, and she ended up smashing Lacey's face into the apron. Becky went for the disarmer, but Lacey ended up bailing out. So basically that's what happened after the match. So, but Lacey Evans versus Allie Katrina, that local, it was just a 2-second match. That was basically it. Then we had Daniel Bryan. He was backstage. He says Kofi Kingston's constant shilling of pancakes, merchandise, and consumerism is a threat to our very existence. That's why he has no choice but to eliminate him as a role model for the future of humanity. He says he's not a role model nor a champion, and that he is here to correct course and regain the WWE Championship and become what he was born to be, and that is the planet's champion. So that was a little promo from Daniel Bryan. Then we had the Viking Raiders versus Curt Hawkins and Zack Ryder. The War Raiders versus Curt Hawkins and Zack Ryder. Hanson and Rowe. This was a tag team match. This was a boring match. Viking Raiders, the War Raiders, end up winning. They end up hitting the Viking Experience on Zack Ryder. Oh yeah, that was it. was a boring match. Moving on, we had Firefly Funhouse, Shitfly Funhouse, as I would call it. Bray Wyatt welcomes us. He says today is going to be a fun day. He says, you know, today's going to be a fun day. And he asks Mercy the Buzzard, what's going on? And we see Mercy's got a mouthful of fluff. And he says it's nothing. But Bray wants him to tell him what's in the box. Abby the Witch asks what Mercy's trying to hide. He ends up telling her to go to sleep. And he ends up calling her a hag. Bray Wyatt ended up reaching in the box, and he ended up snapping at Mercy. Mercy ended up snapping at him, and he manages to pull out Ramblin' Rabbit's corpse. And Mercy says he despises the rabbit for trying to make him adhere to his worldview and ideologies. And Bray says it's okay to express yourself however you like, whether it's painting or flying a kite or ripping Ramblin' Rabbit to shreds. He says you could be forgiven and you can even be rewarded. So Bray goes on to say that it's picnic time. And then when he said that, it cuts, and we see children. They're seated on the floor. They're dressed for fun. They're wearing hats, and they look absolutely miserable. Absolutely miserable. They're like, oh yeah, we gotta sit through this whole Monday Night Raw. You know, that kind of look on their face. The looks on their faces look like us when we sit and watch Raw for 3 hours. And Bray Wyatt reminds us that he'll light the way as long as we let him in. And he ends up, waving goodbye. He's like, oh, goodbye, everybody. I'll see you next week. So, yeah, that was the whole Shitfly Funhouse segment. So yeah, there you go. What can I say every week about this whole Shitfly Funhouse segment? I fucking hate it. So then we see Seth Rollins end up cutting a promo backstage. He says it doesn't matter whether the forearm was an accident or on purpose. He says AJ Styles made his point perfectly clear when he walked away. He ends up saying the next time Styles walks away, it'll be with 2 black eyes and a broken face. So it was a little promo from Seth Rollins. Then we had Drew McIntyre versus Roman Reigns. Of course, the WrestleMania rematch. The same thing that we saw at WrestleMania. Roman Reigns ended up winning by disqualification, by DQ, because Shane McMahon and Elias came out. They ended up double teaming on Roman. The Miz ended up coming out. He makes the save because, during the first hour to the second hour, we saw the Miz in front of Shane's dressing room, waiting for him. And so Miz ended up making the save. He chases Shane off into the crowd. Then we see Elias end up holding up Roman. McIntyre ended up delivering the Claymore to Roman. Then we went backstage and we saw Shane hiding around the corner. Miz ended up running past him. Shane ends up stepping out. He was breathing really hard. And he walks into an interview with Charlie Caruso. And he refuses to answer. He ends up checking his limo. Because there was a limo right over there. Miz is there. He ends up hitting him. He ends up hitting Shane with the chair. And they brawl around the limousine. Shane manages to chuck Miz into the wall, hard enough, and it made Shane, get in the limo and, make his getaway. So that's what happened. Then we had Gallows and Anderson and the Revival in the ring. It was supposed to be a scheduled match, but before the match can even begin, the Usos ended up coming out. They were on stage. The Usos say the Revival called themselves the hottest tag team in WWE. They ended up chuckling to themselves. And the Usos say they've got something to help the Revival out, which will make them a little hotter. He's like, well, you ever heard of Icy Hot? Well, here it is. It's called Oozy Hot. And they end up, the Revival start, wiggling around in, their private areas. They're in discomfort. And this whole segment was absolutely fucking embarrassing. The Revival here, after this, they should just walk out of WWE. Pull a Neville, like what he did. But this whole segment was fucking shit. It was cringeworthy and shitty and not funny. It was stupid. So they were in discomfort, the Revival. Scott Dawson ends up jumping around on the canvas in the mat like a dog, like he was going like. Even Dash Wilder also had an itchy butt. The Usos end up offering them water. They come out of the ring. They come up to the Usos. They grab the water. They pour it all over their balls. And the Usos point out that this whole Oozy Hot, if they put water on it, it's going to make it worse. And, the Revival end up putting the water, all over. And they start shaking, and they end up screaming on the stage. I'm like, oh my God. This is the type of embarrassment that WWE is having, the Revival do. All because the Revival wouldn't sign a 5-year contract with WWE. So this is their punishment from WWE for not signing that 5-year contract. It's going to get worse, people. It's going to get worse for the Revival. And then we saw, Scott Dawson doing flips on the stage because they put the water on themselves, which made it worse. Scott Dawson's doing flips on stage, rolling around like an idiot. And then they went to the back. I'm like, it's so fucking stupid. This was so shitty. This was so fucking embarrassing. This was embarrassing for the Revival. Like I said, if I'm the Revival, I would be walking out right now. I would be walking out. I would pull a Neville and walk out and wait till the contracts are up, which the contracts are not up until next year. I would be like, I would be if the Revival. I'll be waiting for a phone call from Cody Rhodes. Cody Rhodes is going to give them a call, maybe next year, so we can finally see the Revival out of WWE and onto a better, possibly better, show known as AEW. Hopefully that happens. Hopefully we see the Revival next year in AEW. Because the Revival deserves a whole lot better. WWE is just going to keep making them, do embarrassing shit and make them look like a joke. Which which they fucking now are. The Revival are a fucking joke now. My God, this whole segment, like I said, it was fucking shitty. It was unfunny. The only person who I see laughing at this is Vince McMahon. That's the only one who was probably laughing backstage. Stupid. Last week we had the Usos filming Dash Wilder shave Scott Dawson's back. Now this week they have, you know, like a cream which they could make them, you know, look more hotter, called Usi Hot. What a fucking stupid name. Usi Hot. Yeah, so let's rip off Icy Hot. Let's rip off that product. Yay, originality. That's some originality. Yeah. So after that whole shitty ass segment, and the Usos are were the most dominated champions when they were the SmackDown Tag Team Champions. You went from those Usos, and then you bring them on to Raw during the Superstar Shakeup, and now they're a fucking comedy act. What the fuck? I miss the old Usos when they were on SmackDown. They were the Tag Team Champions. You know, they were dominant. Now they're just a comedy act on fucking Raw. Oh my God. So after that we had Kofi Kingston. He ended up cutting a promo saying a lot of folks have said, you know, the same things about him. And that Daniel Bryan said about the same things about him that Daniel Bryan said. They said they thought him winning the WWE Championship was impossible. But he had to show the world that the impossible is possible. He says Daniel Bryan wants to correct the course of history. Oh no. And Kofi says that's what, you know, he's going to do when he not only retains the title, but sends Daniel Bryan's whining and complaining behind, you know, Daniel Bryan's whining and complaining behind back where he came from. So that was a little promo that Kofi ended up cutting. And then we had more time waster here. No Way Jose makes his entrance with his conga line. He's in the ring. Gets interrupted by Lars Sullivan. Lars Sullivan is probably one of, you know, it's like the fourth now for the wild cards from SmackDown. And he ends up destroying, you know, the people who are on the conga line. Slams one into the ring post. Throws another into the ring. And then Lars Sullivan tries to make the save. He ends up throwing strikes at Lars Sullivan. And I'm like, thanks for coming, No Way Jose. Lars ends up dropping him with one punch. Throws the other guy out of the ring. Then he ends up hitting No Way Jose with the Legion Bomb. And that's pretty much what happened. So yeah. Then we had Vince McMahon. He was on the phone explaining that neither Elias nor Shane count on being in the wild card. And he says if anybody past 3 otherwise comes over as a wild card, they'll get suspended. Then we hear like a banging on the door. Vince puts his conversation on hold. And Lars Sullivan ends up coming in. Vince ends up saying to Lars that, you know, it's 4 now. Meaning Lars Sullivan is the 4th. And, you know, then, you know, Lars likes that and then he leaves. That's basically, you know, what it was. Then we had the main event. Kofi Kingston versus Daniel Bryan for the WWE Championship. You know, this was pretty much okay match. I mean, it was a WrestleMania rematch. Kofi Kingston ended up getting the win. Ended up pinning Trouble in Paradise to Daniel Bryan. So Kofi went for the pin. Kofi retains the title. That was it. That was what ended Raw last night. So yeah, absolute garbage, piece of shit Raw last night. Maybe one of the worst Raws of the year so far. Yeah, that you had stupid. Stupid the Revival. You know, with the stupid Uzi Hot shit. God, man. So anyways, that's it for my review of last night's Monday Night Raw. Thank you all for watching. Hope you all enjoyed this video, this review. And definitely give this video a thumbs up. Comment, subscribe. Make sure to follow me on the Stardust app at MikeyBoy101591. So, yes, anyways, that's it for this video, and I'll see you all with the SmackDown review later this week.